Ever feel like you're drowning in a sea of marketing tools trying to keep your business running smoothly? What if you could simplify it all with one platform? That's where Go High Level comes in, your all-in-one sales and marketing solution built for small businesses like you. In fact, Go High Level has over 1 million users just like you. With Go High Level, you can capture leads, automate your prospect and client journeys, quickly and efficiently build stunning websites, sales pages, and sales funnels. Imagine managing your CRM, email, SMS, and funnels without duct taping a dozen tools together. Plus, their unlimited plan lets you add as many contacts and users as you need, no hidden fees. We've been using Go High Level for over a year now and absolutely love it. In fact, Profit First Nation is also powered by Go High Level. Ready to level up? Start your Profit First Nation extended 30-day free trial today at www.gohighlevel.com/Profit First Nation. That's www.gohighlevel.com/Profit First Nation. Streamline your workflow, impress your clients, and grow smarter, not harder.
Welcome to Profit First Nation, the official podcast for entrepreneurs who are operating their businesses in the zone of permanent profitability. I'm Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First, and now here's your Profit First Nation guide, Danielle Mulvey.
All right. Today, I'd like to welcome a very special guest to the podcast. I'd like to welcome Kerrie Genes, who is the CEO and founder of KFIT Body, a women's only fitness and wellness studio based on the East Coast. This month, they're actually celebrating their 15th year anniversary, and she is here to share her Profit First journey. So welcome to the podcast, Kerrie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about how you came into the world of Profit First and using it as a cash management system in your business. You've been in business for a while, and you obviously had bookkeepers and accountants helping you with that. But you made a change in 2025. Want to talk us through that?
Yeah. So funny little side story first, if I can tell you, because everything kind of came full circle. I actually read Mike's book when I first started KFIT 15 years ago. I have the book right here. I'll forever keep this book.
The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. Yes, that's his very first book.
Yeah, so I read it. I aired it at 30 pages. That's when I stopped reading it, and I literally went out and opened my business. It's what gave me the confidence to be like, oh, heck yeah, I can do this. And then 5 years into my business, I read his pumpkin plan, which also helped me at that phase. And now 15 years in, here I am implementing Profit First. So it's a pretty full circle moment. But to answer your question, what brought me to it probably was the pandemic. I have to say I definitely had blinders on when it came to the finances in my business because I never really took any type of business classes. I certainly wasn't savvy in that aspect. Not like I had a 5-year business plan. I started my gym as a side hustle, and then really it just organically grew. So I had to learn as I went along, and everything really was kind of seamless, I would say. Like I never had any massive investments. The business already pretty much paid for itself until I ended up at my location now, where we went through this huge expansion and took out a good amount of debt. And then a couple of years after that, the pandemic hit and everything shifted for so many small businesses, but specifically the fitness world. And just running a brick and mortar is so much different now in terms of the cost. So it really forced me to start to identify like where we had leaks in the business. And I had been working with an accountant, and I remember our first year that we were back to pre-pandemic numbers was 2024. It took us 4 years to get back to that. We had this profitable year, and I had this amount that I was paying taxes on. And I was like, okay, so where's that money? Where's that profit?
Right. Let me just pause you right here. So your CPA does your taxes, you get your prior year's financial, you see a healthy bottom line, and you're like,
Exactly.
yes, amazing.
Yeah.
And then he tells you, and now you owe probably tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, in taxes. And you're like, great, where's that money?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And like, where's the profit? So I just really started to look into finding some help in terms of understanding like the real dollars and the real cash flow in the business. Like, what do those dollars mean? And that was what led me to Kasey.
So what happened was you realized that you just reinvested the money into the business when you had that profitable 2024 year, which is very common. Cash comes in and you see cash. And so we've got cash to spend. So we spend it. And were you operating at that time on like one or two business checking accounts?
The thing was one, all of the dollars were in the same account.
Which is common, which is what everyone does for sure. So
exactly.
Okay, so that was 2024. You get the taxes in 2025, and you're starting to think maybe there's a better way to see where the cash is going. And so you get on Google, right? You start Googling, looking for alternatives to your accountant. And what did you find out there in that big old world?
Yeah, that led me to Kasey, and she is pretty local to my business and primarily an all-women team. So I always try to lean towards that. I service all women, and I think just supporting that local fellow women-owned businesses is important to me. I really just liked her messaging on her website, really spoke to what I was looking for. I didn't know too much about the profit first model at that point, but I initiated setting up a call with her.
And so that's Kasey Anton, the founder of Spark Business Consulting, and she has clients nationwide. She is a rock star. She's also the author of Profit First for Restaurants, but services a lot of industries with Spark Business Consulting. So you set up the call, and this is kind of where it's now coming full circle, because you started with a totally popular entrepreneur 15 years ago, and now it's like, oh wait, Mike Michalowicz wrote other books, including Profit First.
Exactly. So when she kind of sent me some homework and I think I was listening to it and I was like, why is this so familiar? And then I looked at the author and I was like, oh my gosh. So all the stars aligned that I was in the right place for sure.
Great. So when you met with Kasey and decided to pull the trigger and make the transition out of your accountant, who I'm sure you worked with for years, walk us through that process and the moment she said, all right, Kerrie, you need to open up at least 4 more checking accounts as your primary bank. Did you freak out when she said it's time to open up more accounts?
Not really. I mean, like I said, I had taken the book in, and the concept of just moving everything over, because not only did I open up accounts, I moved to another bank as well, was just more of a heavy lift of that process of moving all of our payment systems over to that. But it really wasn't that challenging at all. It was pretty effortless. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first step in Profit First, is you have to open up those bank accounts. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I'd rather do 10 other things, 20 other things than have to engage my bank or maybe move banks. But you got to just tackle that fear, and you've got to just run through it. And if you run through it instead of run against it, then you'll get through it. And it's less painful than you thought it was going to be, right?
Exactly. Just opening up accounts would have been easy enough. Moving everything over was a whole different animal. But at the same time, I wanted a bank that was going to be a lot easier to do transactions from accounts to accounts. And what I was using was a little bit archaic. So I would say that made it a little bit easier too, because the system I was moving towards made it so much easier for me to manage all of the dollars versus my old bank. I would say also, if while you're going to do the work, make sure that you're also doing it with a bank that makes the process a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you're on the other side now, and it wasn't that hard to get to the other side. And how much happier are you on the other side now with your new bank?
Definitely.
So well
much
worth it. Yes, yes. So you guys, do not let the fear of going to your bank, opening up accounts, or moving your banking relationship to another bank keep you from just not understanding how the cash is working in your business.
Yeah.
If you're still operating with your head buried in sand when it comes to the financials of your business, get your butt to the bank. Open up those accounts. And if you need to move to another bank, it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to take you months. You can get through it quickly, but it's all worth it when you make that move. So you started working with Kasey in November of 2025 and kind of cleaned up some things in terms of your chart of accounts and simplified some things a little bit, I believe. And you were ready to hit the ground running come January. And that was your official start to implementing Profit First in your business.
Yeah, there was a little bit of work that needed to be done. Obviously, their systems were different than my old accountant. I feel like it definitely streamlined things for me as the person who doesn't have that financial lens. You know, I don't want to say dumb things down a little bit, but I guess that was the process. They made it easier for me to digest it, which was helpful. And obviously setting up the percentages and where I needed to be. To me, being somebody who reaches for those types of goals, just having that visual goal made it so much easier for me to understand, okay, I can change this so that I can increase this by 2%. So that was much more helpful.
Yeah, and I often see the chart of accounts becomes overwhelming, and there's just too much going on, and there's too much noise, and there's too many accounts and categories. It just becomes tedious to look at when you kind of roll things up and you're looking at things in more of a macro scale in terms of your chart of accounts. It does make it easier to consume as the owner and to keep a pulse on the finances of your business. So, you know, your chart of accounts, you got to be careful with that, but it is worth it when you go to clean it up a bit. It does take some effort, but again, the bit of effort makes the future so much easier, right? So you cleaned up your chart of accounts, and then Kasey and her team did the instant assessment of how you ended 2025. And then that gives you your current allocation percentages. And I spoke to Kasey before we met up here, and she was like, hey, actually, Kerrie had a very profitable business and was doing really well and was actually pretty close, if not really already there in terms of her allocations. Now, one thing that you didn't have before was you were not allocating to a tax account, right?
Correct.
Which was kind of the problem before, was you had the money, but you were taking it as owner distributions and maybe like a higher salary, etc. But now those 3 servings of profit, owner's pay, and tax are 3 servings for you. And before, you were kind of taking it out as 1 serving probably, and just kind of like then spending that money. But now you've got the clarity that you've got profit, owner's pay, and tax. And now you know you'll be set for next year now that you have that tax account.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said, going through the experience of 2020, it caused me to really do a deep dive on our expenses and all of those little things that were like a million paper cuts. I think that's why we landed in a place where we were already operating pretty good from like the goal of our market on where we should be. But I think obviously a lot of business, if they just have blinders on, they're not seeing that, you know? And then to your point, even though I was doing well, I still didn't have an understanding on what that big giant bucket of money was in the account. So when the taxes came up or at the end of the year, I could still be sidelined by that because I'm having to spend the money on taxes and not knowing if there was enough money that was going to come in to replenish it. So there's still that just area of uncertainty, even though I was doing well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that need to come out of this one pile of cash.
Right.
And you're not thinking in percentages either. But because Profit First is a cash management system that is based on percentages, it allows you to normalize your cash flow and it allows you to start allocating to taxes so that you have money in there to pay your quarterly taxes when those quarterly estimated taxes are due, or to reconcile the final taxes of the year. You also brought a great point that in Profit First, you've got 5 accounts. You've got the income account where the money comes in, and then on your designated allocation day, you allocate to profit, owner's pay, tax, and then to operating expenses. Now you can add accounts if you want sub accounts under operating expenses, et cetera. But really, you had already done a lot of the work, which is again why you were successful coming out of the gate of almost being at your target allocation percentages, was that you had already done and kept the discipline up from cutting those expenses down during COVID. When people implement Profit First, I mean, the money is just seeping out of the business. The businesses are successful, they're making money, but it's like, where's the cash going? And obviously the biggest bucket is operating expenses. And that includes payroll. And that includes maybe having some inefficient employees. That includes having subscriptions that you're not even using those services anymore. So it is important to stay on top of that. And you probably don't remember the percentage, but when I see people do a good audit of their operating expenses, I mean, they're cutting 10, 20, I've seen 30, 35% get cut in operating expenses. That just is like, you don't have to spend money to make money, people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and just having that goal, like I said, because even for us right now, we have a goal to decrease our OPEX a little bit. So understanding what that goal is just allows me to go in and look at, okay, where are we leaking a little bit, or where are we overspending a little bit? Whereas in the past, I guess I was just shooting from the hip a little bit, but this allows you to be more savvy with those cuts.
Yeah. And you can see like, hey, we've got this much to spend in operating expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like, well, right now we're allocating, and I'm just going to make up numbers here just for the audience, but let's just say you're allocating 50% to operating expenses. It's like, if you can skinny that allocation down to 45%, well, then where does that other 5% go? Well, Kerrie, you can give yourself a raise and increase your owner's pay. You can increase a couple percentage points going to profit, or maybe you're not quite there in the tax allocation and you need to increase the tax allocation. So again, by working with these percentages, you really are normalizing your cash flow, but you're also seeing where the opportunity is. And I know that you're very competitive, and I know that you like to set goals and achieve those goals. So just like you said, it's like, hey, now I see if it's 50% operating expenses, what does it look? I can do 45%. Exactly. And then that extra 5% goes into those 3 servings for you. So that's the fun part of Profit First. But you got to open those bank accounts first, people. You can't have the fun until you open up those bank accounts. But that is the easy part. And then just make that first step. And at least if you're allocating 1% to profit, listeners out there, you'll start to build that muscle, and you'll start to be profitable. Just allocating even 1% to profit will make you profitable. So what would your advice be to a fellow business owner who has been in business for a while, read some business books, has a good accountant who puts the things in the boxes and has compliant financials, but just kind of reconciles the month and says, here are your reports, and leaves you to yourself. What would be your advice to the listeners out there who were like you know, kind of a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, just definitely invest the time to do it, because there's something that is more on like a subconscious mental level as well, in terms with how it's organized, because again, you just have a deeper understanding on what every dollar is doing in your business. And because of that, we've been able to, like, 3 times what our profit is and owner's pay is, because the dollars are being managed. And I'm not just guessing, oh, we're going to buy this because the gym needs it, or I'm going to add this role because the gym needs it. I'm really making decisions that are aligned with our percentage goals. A good example of this for this year in particular, we really got hit with a huge CAM bill this year, like the biggest we've had.
Oh. Okay.
Yes.
So based off of your lease, so she said CAM bill, that is when you have a lease and your property owner says, hey, time to pony up.
Yeah, time to pony up is for real. But so that also increased. Now we have an adjustment for this year. So I feel like 2 years ago, even though we're finally profitable, I would have panicked. I would have been like, are we going to be able to handle this $2,000 swing up in our rent out of nowhere? And having money in the bank from our profits, I'm just letting that sit there. I know, okay, we have reserve that we can handle that. But then also, what does that look like to adjust to make room for that new operating expense? There's just those tweaks that you're able to make live with your team or your accountant that just changes the game plan and keeps you in control, and also keeps your nervous system a little bit less taxed.
Yeah. And I bet going forward, you're going to have a new account called CAM that you're allocating a small percentage to, that is just going to accumulate and build over time, so that the next time the CAM bill comes, it's already there. It's just waiting.
Like, exactly.
So I think maybe can we talk just a little bit about the difference of working with an accountant or bookkeeper who just gives you your reports, checks the boxes, puts things in the right boxes and says, here you go, but doesn't provide any consultation. So you went from that, which is, I say, 90% of bookkeepers and accountants out there for small business. And then you went to a certified profit professional. You went to Kasey and her team at Spark Business Consulting. What has that been like?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it obviously has been transformative for the business, but it feels more of like a live relationship, because there's that deeper understanding when they're making that analysis month to month. So if something seems off or out of the ordinary, I'm much more aware of it, because we're working cohesively, like constantly. So that, I think, has been the biggest game changer, because you can course correct really quickly instead of it being like, hey, it's tax time and this is what it's looking like. And you're like, okay, cool. I was not prepared for that. So that, I feel like, has been, yeah, really just a game changer.
To have people who care and people who will provide some consultative heads up to you. And you're not just going this alone, because again, most of these relationships with bookkeepers and accountants is just kind of like very transactional. Like you pay them to reconcile your accounts and send you your financials, and that's about it. They're not going to give you warning signs. They're not going to point out the red flags. That's the business owner's job. So when you have financial and accounting and bookkeeping professionals that have your back and want to be consultative with you, then you're not alone anymore, right? And it kind of makes it more fun.
Yeah, and all those goals are like little benchmarks, right? So to your point, they're flagging it. If something is going off, it's like, oh, wow, we were at, whatever, 20% profit margin, and this month it's 10. There's just so much more interaction in the business that way.
That's great. Excellent. So amazing. Congratulations on implementing Profit First. Mike has other books too. So maybe you want to read All In next.
Yeah, put it on my list.
Okay, here we go, All In. But thank you so much for joining us, Kerrie. And if you would like to work with Kasey and her team at Spark Business Consulting, you can find them at sparkbusinessconsulting.com, or you can work with another certified Profit First professional by going to profitfirstnation.com and clicking on Contact. Thank you so much for joining us, and cheers to another profitable day, my entrepreneurial friends.